Hi everyone. Ludum Dare changed up the schedule this year and held an event in January. The theme this time around turned out to be Harvest. Unfortunately, this was one of the few themes I wasn't excited about. I was worried that it would be too limiting and that we'd end up with just 1,000 farming simulator games. But regardless, I was excited to participate, so I started brainstorming ideas with some friends. Colton came up with a great idea to make interesting gameplay.
I feel like with Harvest, there's something about having a delayed gratification,
Sure, I
but
like
having
that.
and then also being able to have it earlier, but less rewarding.
Okay. Oh, so
So,
you can harvest stuff at the wrong time or the right time and it affects how you
correct.
play.
Yeah. So think about it in the sense that you're playing Smite and you're building Book of Thoth, right? You're getting your stacks.
We talked about a few game genres, but that idea felt so powerful that I knew I'd be making a game around that mechanic. DJ came in a little bit later and helped me land on the idea of a twin stick shooter. He also introduced me to Geometry Wars, which looks really cool and I definitely want to play it later. I looked up some reference video and used that throughout the weekend to inspire my visual design. I started my work with Trello, organizing all the tasks that I'd have to do. And first up was making a decent character controller. I definitely had a few brain farts that made this take longer than it should have, but it wasn't too long later that I could move my little placeholder sprite around, both with a keyboard and a controller. Next up was getting him to shoot. This is where my programming brain really started to kick in, and I don't want to come across as arrogant, but I am really pleased with some of the software architecture I designed during this jam. I really think it was the reason I was able to get so much done. It started with the weapons and bullets. I wrote these both in an abstract way that made it possible to mix and match damage, rate of fire, even bullet type later on. Neither the player nor the enemies needed special scripting to know how their weapon worked. They just knew, I'm holding a gun, I want to shoot it. I did a little bit of visual work on the bullets before wrapping up for the night. This wasn't quite as far as I'd hoped to be, but at least a solid start. Saturday morning started with the camera tilting effect. I really liked this from the Geometry Wars reference video, and thought it would make the gameplay much more engaging. Then the bulk of Saturday was programming some underlying systems like health, damage, and the harvesting mechanic. I still had a lot of placeholder graphics in the game, so it wasn't obvious at this point what was happening, but I had a programmer's moment of joy when my log messages told me that the harvesting code was all working. One aspect that gave me some trouble was when I started making enemies come after the player. You know I'm going to start with basic ones that just move straight towards you. This very quickly revealed a flaw where multiple enemies would all just collapse into a single position. I found some help for swarm logic, which I definitely didn't implement perfectly, but was good enough to prevent enemies from hiding on top of one another. I quickly whipped up a spawner and a wave system, and we had our minimum viable game. One issue I've had in past games that I wanted to keep in mind was accidentally giving players a low effort and low fun method of playing the game. I saw an issue forming in this game. Since kind of the big idea is you want to let your power-ups sit on the ground for a while to max out, there's nothing stopping players from getting to like the last enemy in a round and just kiting it for a while.
Ooh, okay.
Do you have any ideas? Woo, this looks cool. How to avoid that? Oh, okay. Once the spawns end, let's say a 30-second timer start, and if the wave is still going when those 30 seconds have passed, a special enemy drops in that goes and eats your power-ups. Thus, the enemy harvester was created. Here he comes. The mechanics were working well, but I couldn't give my friends test builds with the graphics the way that they were. There really wasn't any indication that a power-up had been left behind by an enemy. Inspired by Geometry Wars, I had a vision for this game to use 3D models for everything, rather than the 2D images I'd been working with so far. This meant hopping into Blender, and I started by making a very basic crystal to represent the power-ups. When I resumed work on Sunday, I felt like it made sense to continue converting the game into 3D models. The player character came next. all the gameplay was still going to be in a single plane, which means I could keep the 2D physics as they were. However, replacing the graphic did mean readjusting all of the hitboxes to match. Continuing the visual work, I created a shader for the power-up crystals. I wanted something more than just a progress bar to show how much they had grown. Although, in the end, I did make a progress bar anyway, since they're much more readable than glowiness. I made a number of improvements under the hood to the harvest and power-up system, but none of that really changed the immediate gameplay. I did get a few UI additions in to help players understand when enemies could be harvested. Looking back at the amount I had created so far was really promising, but looking ahead at all the ideas and enemy types that I still wanted to have in the game was a little bit daunting. I got further along in the workflow of making power-ups and applying their respective effects to the player. The first few that I did were kinda slow, but thanks to my architecture choices, and writing myself a step-by-step guide, I was able to crank through the future power-ups fairly fast. I've always felt that art is one of my weakest aspects of game development, so it really makes me happy when I develop a new understanding of shaders and textures, and things turned out as I expected. In this game, I wanted slight trails for all the entities moving around. Based on my past learnings, I believed I could just make this simple texture with a bright line on the top and bottom edges, and it would come through looking like a trail with hard edges. Nailed it! Freeform creative art is still outside my wheelhouse, but I'm getting more comfortable with technical art. Alright, so we're about to see the benefit of going with simple 3D shapes and models, not trying to do anything really artistic. That'll work. Yeah, that's cool. And there's our guy. Right? Cool. That'll be one of the units. The rest of the day was a lot of small stuff like UI notifications, screen shake, and starting to get a few sound effects into the game. Nothing groundbreaking, but bringing up the overall polish of the game. It was about time to call it a day. Psych! I only had 4 enemy types in the game, and hadn't done any of the ones that I thought would be more interesting. The jam was going to end at 3 PM on Monday, so I figured, why not? I'll just stay up and power through to the finish. Then I can sleep once it's done. I forgot to record some of the work in the small hours of the morning, but I got the radial pulsing enemies in. I had 2 more on the list that I thought would make for the most interesting gameplay. A healing enemy and a big tanky shield guy. Back to Blender for some more modeling. It was a bit of a mad rush near the end, but I got them both in. And I'm glad I prioritized these 2, because they made the game way more interesting than I initially thought. None of the enemies were very smart on their own. I'd never claimed to have written anything close to AI here, but the combination of all the behaviors made it really feel like they were an organized army trying to beat you. The first time I saw a shield guy protecting a healing guy who was regenerating a harvester, it really made me laugh. It felt like I had to analyze the playing field every moment to see what they were planning and what targets I had to prioritize. Running that low on time and with no sleep, I probably didn't do the best job with balancing the spawns. I did end up making 30 predefined waves, and if you got past 30, it would just repeat the same spawns. But I tried to make 30 a little bit too rude for that to ever happen. I'll leave a few waves of gameplay to finish out this video. Thanks for checking out another devlog. There will of course be some links in the description if you want to check the game out for yourself. See ya!